A Brampton man accused of murdering his wife in 2006 has been arrested in Mexico and returned to Canada.
Sends a message to those that are out there that we're looking for you and we're not going to stop.
Melena Morales, a 31-year-old mother of two, was found murdered inside her family's home in 2006. Investigators believed Henry Morales fled Canada, but were unsure exactly where he was. After 13 years on the run, he was located and arrested in Mexico last year, but the extradition process took 10 months. Morales has been charged with murder and is scheduled to appear in court today. For more on this, let's bring in former Toronto Police Homicide Detective Mark Mendelson. Thank you very much, Mark, for joining us to talk about this. Your reaction, because this was so many years ago, obviously 2006, so it was a bit of a cold case. Your reaction to the fact that they found him and brought him back?
Well, I think it's a very good example that people should realize that unsolved murders or murders that have not been resolved by way of an arrest never close. They always stay open in a homicide squad. Sometimes they get transferred to the cold case squad. But in this case, they knew who they were looking for. And it was a matter of time, Beverly, and they used the tools that they had available. They used the media. They used America's Most Wanted. And with a stroke of luck, a couple of women in Mexico had suspicions about somebody that was living in their community, made the right calls, questioned the right things. And lo and behold, he's identified. And I would assume he would have been identified with a lot of help from the Mexican authorities as well.
Yeah, well, let me ask you about that process in terms of the police work. So they get this tip. Whoever thinks that this might be this person, they have to then go down there, work with Mexican authorities. And what do they do at that point so that he doesn't flee again, or before they have figured out that, in fact, it is him?
Well, if we read it correctly from the get-go, they knew exactly who they were looking for. He committed this murder. He dropped the children off at a relative's place and went directly to the airport. So there's no big secret there, no mystery. So once he's located, what they have to do is positively identify him. And I would assume they did that either by way of fingerprints that were obtained by the Mexican authorities surreptitiously, and more than likely DNA from a cast-off sample that he might have left somewhere in a restaurant, or a cigarette, or a Kleenex that he tossed on the street. Once they identify him, then it's a matter of conducting surveillance to make sure that he doesn't leave that jurisdiction. They'll do a lot of background work as to trying to determine when he arrived, what he's been doing since then, dealing with the judicial system in Mexico to arrange for an arrest and an extradition. And that process, as you mentioned earlier, takes some time. But in the meantime, he was in custody for the entire duration. So it worked out well. He's back in the GTA now. He'll be in court this morning. I can assure you he's not getting out on bail. He's a flight risk. That's clear. He's demonstrated that. And now our judicial process will take over, and he'll get his trial.
So tell me a little bit about the people are always fascinated, with cold cases, and from time to time they're featured on different programs. And in this case, it was featured on America's Most Wanted. Now that was some time ago too. That was in 2009. But when it gets that kind of exposure, when a case gets that kind of exposure, how helpful is that for authorities?
It's extremely helpful because it reaches millions and millions of people in North America. It gets replayed both in North America, in South America, and in Europe. It's always on somewhere. You can always find an episode of it. And bear in mind, this was not a cold case. This was a case where they were looking for the suspect. So the whodunit aspect of it was not at issue. So now it's a question of finding him. And, they probably knew from airport information 14 years ago that he took a flight from Toronto to somewhere. And, I don't know how far they traced him, whether they traced him directly to Mexico or to the US or somewhere else, and he made his way into Mexico. But the exposure, the assistance of the media, the assistance of organizations like America's Most Wanted certainly come into play. The more eyes looking for this person, the better.
Mark Mendelson, good to have you on this. Thanks so much for your time this afternoon.
Have a good afternoon, Beverly.